A police officer in Kenosha, Wisconsin shoots a black man named Jacob Blake 7 times from behind, leaving him partially paralyzed.
Conveniently cuts the video so you cannot see that Jacob Blake is holding a knife. Also not telling your listeners that the man in question was at the home of his ex-wife whom he sexually abused and was attempting to take their kids. Not to mention not telling your listeners that the man who was shot had been non-compliant to verbal commands, non-responsive to 2 tasers, and put an officer in a headlock.
2 days later, in the midst of protests and unrest,
Calling rioting and looting protest and unrest.
a teenager carrying an assault rifle kills 2 people and wounds a 3rd.
The New York Times does not know what an assault rifle is and cannot be bothered to Google it.
The case will likely focus on the few crucial minutes around the fatal shootings on August 25th of 2020. But our investigation of these events
The New York Times claiming to do investigative journalism.
reveals that the story is about much more than a single person. We analyzed hours of footage from that day.
Saying analyze when they mean misconstrue.
It felt volatile, it felt tense, it felt like a war zone.
Maybe if you didn't light a dumpster and business on fire, it wouldn't have.
We're not like bad people or like people just going out to like shit up.
The people of Kenosha would disagree.
I feel like had we not been there and not reacted the way that we did to the situation, I think we could have been looking at an even worse scenario.
Over-speculation is over-speculation.
While protests against systemic racism were what first drew out crowds in Kenosha, Rittenhouse, his victims, and many of those closest to the shootings were white.
They're disproving their own race baiting? You win, New York Times. I'll take one off.
Oh shit. We got shots fired, guys. We got shots fired.
Possibly the blandest way you could have said that sentence.
On the Sunday before the Rittenhouse shooting, Kenosha police officers respond to a domestic complaint and try to arrest Jacob Blake. As Blake moves away from them and leans into his car, he's holding a knife.
Not telling your viewers that the, quote, domestic complaint was that of a mother fearing the man who sexually assaulted her was going to take her kids. Also telling your audience that Jacob Blake had a knife and acting like the officer's actions were unreasonable.
Blake's lawyer later said that Blake didn't pose a threat.
Well, of course the defense attorney claims his client didn't pose a threat. That's his job. Can you imagine if he just conceded that Jacob Blake was a threat?
For the next 48 hours, the protests intensify. And at night, local businesses are looted and set on fire.
The New York Times watched that B-roll and recorded that audio and said, yeah, this will convince people that they were peaceful protests.
Eventually, a new group inserts themselves into the already chaotic scene. Dozens of men, mostly white, equipped with military-style weapons and gear.
We have now gone through race baiting and gender baiting. If only there was a disabled Latina trans woman who suffered from schizophrenia, that would have made everyone feel better. The New York Times doesn't understand what military-grade weaponry means, nor have they read the Bill of Rights.
It's Tuesday morning, 13 hours before the Rittenhouse shooting, when on a Facebook page called The Kenosha Guard, a post publishes.
So my post just basically said, are there any patriots among us willing to take up arms and defend our lives, our families, our neighborhoods, and our businesses?
This information is irrelevant to the case of Kyle Rittenhouse.
Jacob Blake! Jacob Blake!
At this point, demonstrators are marching peacefully in downtown Kenosha. They're demanding an end to police violence against black people.
Peaceful protesters that burn down buildings.
The presence of openly armed white men inflames the situation.
If you're not for Black Lives Matter and you're not for the movement, get the fuck out of here! They quit burning the fucking town!
While this lady looks ridiculous, she makes a good point. If the rioters were peaceful, they wouldn't have to be there.
Why is he here, and why is it okay that he's here with an assault rifle to protect infrastructure? But if I was here against the police to protect life, would I be able to?
He's there because he doesn't want to see his hometown ravaged, and he's allowed to have a long gun because it's his constitutional right to do so. Unfortunately, your version of protecting life is stopping police interaction with black Americans.
Out of everyone that I saw with With the militia, they were all white males.
Race baiting done by a black person is still race baiting. I wonder if the majority of protesters were white because maybe, just maybe, Kenosha, Wisconsin is 70% white.
So I honestly feel that they came to incite more racial problems.
No, they came to stop rioters from burning their city to the ground.
Throughout the day and early into the evening, more openly armed men arrived near the protests. Some positioned themselves close to businesses that had been damaged on earlier nights. This is where we first see Ryan Balch, an Iraq and Afghanistan veteran from a town 40 minutes away.
That is significantly less than some people commute to work every day.
Who's there with a group of friends. He's also been subpoenaed in the Rittenhouse trial.
I would say what brought me to Kenosha was that I felt like something needed to be done. If law enforcement's not going to try to keep the peace, then somebody else needs to go out there and make sure that that happens.
This man, though silly looking, highlights the problem perfectly. If the state is not going to protect my stuff, that means I have to protect my stuff. If the state is not going to protect my community, that means I have to protect my community.
At the time, he also supported the extremist Boogaloo movement, which is anti-police and calls for the government's overthrow. He says he later stopped supporting the movement. Balch and his friends eventually link up with other openly armed men. Among them is Kyle Rittenhouse.
Poisoning the well by introducing him as a Boogaloo boy despite the Boogaloo boys lining up with the Black Lives Matter activists. Implying that Kyle is part of this fringe extremist group is wrong.
As for Rittenhouse, we don't know whether he sees himself as some kind of neutral force between the protesters and the police, like Ryan does.
Yes, we do. If you watched all those hours of video, you should know that Kyle was there to be a medic, as he was a certified EMT and carried a first aid kit. He was also shown helping protesters who were injured. We also saw him cleaning up graffiti and putting out fires. Kyle was there solely to protect his community.
His social media posts at the time seemed to indicate he was a strong supporter of law enforcement. Since the shooting, he's also been seen flashing white power signs.
The New York Times unironically believes that the OK symbol means white power. Imagine being this disconnected with reality. No one show these people the cover of Home Alone 2, or else they may cancel Macaulay Culkin.
Break out Kyle! Break out Kyle! And he's become an icon for far-right groups.
When these people say far right, they mean anyone to the right of AOC.
The organized daytime protests at the park are now over, and law enforcement has announced a curfew.
Government-instituted curfews are for schmucks in the same way that lockdowns are for schmucks.
Our goal that entire evening was to disperse people from the Civic Center after curfew and to get them to leave, to get them to go.
Oh, look at that. A schmuck.
Breaking curfew was worth helping to create some type of positive change.
I swear to you, they must have found a homeless man on the street and offered him a hot meal and a bed to sleep in for a night if he dressed up like a hippie leftist and told them a bunk story.
It's one thing to sit at home and say that yes, Black Lives Matter, but it's so much more impactful.
There's no way this guy has a home.
I don't normally like to carry at protests because I don't want it to be seen as a sign of aggression, but I did carry on Tuesday specifically because of the threats that I saw floating around in the Kenosha Guard group.
Sure, the homeless hippie leftist has a gun he carries around.
Just arriving at the protest are Hannah Giddings and her boyfriend Anthony Huber. Both are unarmed.
I wonder if the girlfriend knew he had strangled his brother and threatened to gut him like a fish before getting into a relationship with him.
I wouldn't really say we were like heavy activists or anything previously, but we knew Jake Blake and felt like we needed to be present and standing united with the people who believe the same things that we do and want basic human rights, civil rights, equality.
She can't help herself but laugh because she knows what she's saying is ridiculous.
Among the shrinking crowd is Gage Grosskreutz, a paramedic from Milwaukee, who's also under subpoena for the Rittenhouse trial.
Gage lives an hour away from Kenosha, but no one has claimed that he should not have been in Kenosha armed with a gun that night.
When you go into a protest or a march in a medic capacity, you're essentially waiving that luxury to be able to pick a side because, ethically speaking, you're there to treat everybody.
Ah, yes, like what Kyle did when he applied aid to protesters who were injured.
Nathan Pete Grosskreutz decided to come armed with a handgun.
Because it's my right. Simple as that.
Only it wasn't his right, because he would later concede in court proceedings that he was not legally allowed to carry that gun at the time of the riots.
He'll later be shot by Kyle Rittenhouse after drawing his gun and trying to stop him.
How insane does it sound to say, man who attempts to execute a 17-year-old gets shot in the bicep, which makes him the victim?
You're not going to let the city of Kenosha burn because you want to, in the late evening hours, start destroying stuff.
Nice sentiment, but you stood by and let it happen.
Tell your deputies to do if they encountered armed militia people?
By the time I think I knew that they were out there doing this, our staff was already deployed out there protecting the area. There was no direction to deal with the Kenosha Garden anyway at that point.
This militia has nothing to do with Kyle Rittenhouse.
Balch tells protesters to keep moving.
The cops are straight up with us that they were going to push y'all to us, have y'all get pissed off at us, and then wrap you guys the fuck up.
Right.
So that's why I'm trying to push everybody on and move fast.
Anti-police Boogaloo Boy is telling protesters to get out of the area so police cannot apprehend them.
One of the militia members claimed that a police officer told him that the officers were going to push the protesters out of Civic Center Park and that the militia would handle them.
I don't believe that first.
The New York Times thinks its audience is so brain dead that they can tell a bold-faced lie without any repercussions. The militia member literally said that the police were going to wrap the protesters up, presumably meaning that the police were trying to corner protesters and enforce the curfew, which the militia members wanted to prevent.
The police continue pushing protesters further down the road to this intersection, near a gas station.
Ah, what a sight. The gas station that Black Lives Matter rioters were attempting to blow up with a literal dumpster fire.
Oh, yeah, watch out. They got their guns up.
Hey, they're just trying to protect their property. Hey, no one touch anyone.
They're racist and they're out here to look cool.
This shows a hilarious dichotomy between the people protecting the community and those burning it down.
Here is where we first see Joseph Rosenbaum, the first person Kyle Rittenhouse.
Failing to mention that this guy is a career pedophile. Also, just look at this guy. He looks like he just got out of a mental hospital. Hey, wait a minute.
Shoot me, nigga! Shoot me, nigga!
I'm astounded that they showed this psychopath screaming expletives, so I'll remove a sin for that. Although not pointing out the irony that the white ginger at the BLM riot is shouting the N-word is deserving of a sin as well, so we'll call it a wash.
Why else are you going to show up, especially Kyle Rittenhouse, show up to a city you don't even live in, armed to the teeth to protect your community? This is not your community, pal. You don't live here.
Only he lives 20 minutes away, worked in Kenosha, has close relatives who live in Kenosha, and spent a large portion of his time in Kenosha. It is absolutely his community, and he went to protect it because he cared about it, unlike the rest of you.
Are you guys protecting that building?
Yes!
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
But the police praise the armed men and offer them assistance.
Need water?
We need water.
We'll give you a couple. We appreciate you guys, we really do.
Funny how when you're protecting your community, police don't tend to mind you being there.
But just like the protesters, the armed civilians are violating the curfew, and police treat them much differently.
Probably because they are not actively burning down buildings and trying to blow up gas stations.
Minutes after encountering the officers, Rittenhouse explains to a reporter from the Daily Caller why he thinks he belongs in Kenosha.
Our job is to protect this business, and part of my job is to also help people. If there's somebody hurt, I'm running into harm's way. That's why I have my rifle.
Conveniently cut out the part of the interview where he says he brought his rifle for his own protection and also brought his med kit, which he is later seen using to patch up protesters.
Rittenhouse walks towards a parking lot where cars are being vandalized.
Vandalized does not mean the same thing as burning. The car lot was being lit on fire.
He passes Joseph Rosenbaum, who was fighting with the armed men at the gas station earlier. Rosenbaum now starts chasing Rittenhouse.
Wow, just wow. They admit that the pedophile was chasing the 17-year-old and attempted to assault him. Incredible. This means that the pedophile initiated the confrontation, meaning Kyle is justified in shooting him after the molester catches up to him. Right? Right?
and throws a plastic bag that holds his belongings from the hospital. Close behind them, a man holds up a handgun and fires it. We don't know why.
The most reasonable assumption would be it was to intimidate the 17-year-old running away from a pedophile.
Then Rosenbaum lunges towards Rittenhouse. Rittenhouse fires 4 times.
Okay, you win, New York Times. You're giving Kyle a great defense. You're almost as good as the future prosecutor in his court case.
Oh shit. We got shots fired, guys. We got shots fired.
Pop, 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 pop. And I was like, oh, so they are really shooting.
Yeah, the BLM rioters did start shooting and instigating violence against a 17-year-old fleeing from them.
I gotta find some cover.
Oh man, maybe they really are really just trying to kill people. And if they were going to take advantage of a situation, I'm a black person and I don't want to be a target.
Race baiting is in fact still race baiting. As long as you don't chase someone with the intent to harm them, you won't get shot.
Rittenhouse calls a friend, while others are helping Rosenbaum, who's on the ground. Then he flees the scene.
He flees because there is a mob after him.
Why you shoot him? Hey! No, why you shoot him?
He didn't disarm himself after the first shooting. He continued to run around. As a gun owner, I view his actions as completely irresponsible.
In what world does it make sense to disarm yourself after someone attempts to assault you and then his buddies start approaching you? Can you imagine someone trying to mug you and after you defended yourself, the mugger's buddies show up so you drop your gun? You would have to be an idiot to do that, which I suppose makes sense coming from the psychotic homeless man.
And as soon as they were all saying he shot somebody, Anthony was gone. And I tried to grab onto him and nobody was gonna stop him, you know? And then I hear a bunch more gunshots down the road and I was like, I just had a feeling it was him.
It is never a good idea to chase someone with a gun and then hit them in the head with a skateboard multiple times. Did I mention she was dating a wife beater?
Rittenhouse trips and falls. Anthony Huber hits Rittenhouse with a skateboard and attempts to disarm him. Rittenhouse shoots him in the chest. Here is Gage Grosskreutz with his gun drawn.
Let's just take a moment to acknowledge how well this 17-year-old kid handled his weapon throughout the duration of the assault. Incredible trigger discipline and always having his barrel pointed correctly. His handling likely saved his life. Bravo, young man. Bravo.
Also gets shot and calls out for help.
I need a fucking medic! I've been trying to get on the back.
The reality of it is this is going to be a part of my life from here on.
Yeah, you will forever have to live with the fact that you attempted to execute a 17-year-old kid who was being assaulted and then got absolutely outclassed in terms of firearm control by that kid.
Keep him right there. We're coming out to you.
Rittenhouse runs toward police vehicles and raises his hands.
This is in fact the correct way to approach police. Complete compliance and a surrendering position.
Hey, he just shot them! Hey, dude right here just shot them! Dude right here just shot all of them down there!
The police make no attempt to stop him, and he isn't arrested until the next day.
Bad policing is bad.
I didn't talk to them, but I'm sure they didn't know what this person was doing.
I'm just looking for my partner. I'm just trying to find where he went. I knew he had been shot, you know? And then later on, I saw that video. They had pulled Anthony into that truck minutes before I got there.
Both Joseph Rosenbaum and Anthony Huber die from their injuries.
Death should never be celebrated, but the proper use of self-defense should be. And maybe the world is better off with one less pedophile.
Dude, Anthony Huber, man, he went down like a hero. You know, he thought there was a threat there and he was reacting to it. He just wasn't quick enough to react to that threat. And so, I mean, he got a really good death out of that.
No, he is not. He attempted to brain a 17-year-old with a skateboard who was on the ground trying to flee from assaulters. This is that car lot that they burned down. I wonder how the owner of that local lot feels about the folks protecting his stuff.
Kyle came here and he played cowboy. He played vigilante. He came here looking for a confrontation and he found one.
The homeless man thinks that the person who came to clean up graffiti, put up fires, and apply medical aid was attempting to be a cowboy.
Who's responsible? I can't tell you. I guess everyone who was there that night holds some level of responsibility. And who carries the most, I can't tell you.
Those who carry the most responsibility are the city officials who were too afraid to order the chief of police to do his job when he was failing to do so. Not to mention the mob of rioters who attempted to murder a 17-year-old.
Why didn't you guys arrest him right then and there? Because if it would have been one of us, things would have happened a lot faster and a lot differently.
You mean BLM protesters? Women? People wearing headscarves? Oh, I see. Race baiting is still race baiting.
Some people feel like Kyle Rittenhouse is a hero, and some people feel like he is a murderer. I feel personally that the situation, regardless of what was happening, should have resulted in something completely different and not people dying.
Completely reasonable take from this gentleman. I'll knock one off for that. Local and federal prosecutors declined to bring charges against Rustin Shesky, the officer who shot Jacob Blake. Oh, so that means according to our justice system, the cop was innocent, probably because he was defending innocent people in his community. Protesters sued Kevin Mathewson, Ryan Balch, and Facebook, among others, in federal court. Interesting. And of course it was dropped, because it was frivolous.
Versus Kyle Rittenhouse. As to the first count of the information, Joseph Rosenbaum. We, the jury, find the defendant Kyle H. Rittenhouse not guilty. As to the second count of the information, Richard McGinnis, we, the jury, find the defendant Kyle H. Rittenhouse not guilty. As to the third count of the information, unknown male, we, the jury, find the defendant Kyle H. Rittenhouse not guilty. As to the fourth count of the information, Anthony Huber, we, the jury, find the defendant Kyle H. Rittenhouse not guilty. As to the fifth count of the information, Gage Grosskreutz, we, the jury, find the defendant Kyle H. Rittenhouse not guilty.
Hello everyone, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, and please leave whatever video, politician, figure, or whatever you'd like me to sing next in the comments down below. But for now, I'll leave you with a little hint on who's next. This guy.